with almost exactly the same facts went the other direction and said, for all the things that the Constitution protects, it does not protect someone's right to sell caskets. If the state wants to say you have to be a licensed funeral director, if it says you've got to embalm 24 dead bodies before you're allowed to sell what is essentially a box, then by golly, we're going to let them do it. We're going to let the state say this. And so you have all sorts of kind of bizarre and unusual restrictions that just make no sense whatsoever. But as of right now, the courts allow it. And that's where the Freedom Center comes in. And this is part of what we're wanting to do. Our goal is to try and get back to some common sense in the way that courts apply the constitutional provisions that we've been celebrating tonight. If you look 100 years ago in the state of Missouri, you'll find a case where the state had imposed restrictions on the practice of barbering. You weren't allowed to cut hair unless you first got permission from the state. And the barbers had all gotten together and said, we want to make it so that you can't compete against us unless you work 2 years for free. They said, you have to get 2 years of training, and you're not allowed to accept any money while you're training to cut hair, and the person who's teaching you is not allowed to accept any money while you're training to cut hair. Well, who in the world is going to go into a profession where you have to basically donate 2 years of your life and your services just to get permission to do this? So the Missouri Supreme Court took a look at this, and in a fantastic case, they recognized the only reason that this law is on the books is to protect the barbers that are already working. And they used one of my favorite words I've ever seen in a court case. The Missouri Supreme Court said, it is un-American to tell people that they have to do this kind of work for no compensation just because an interested group has been able to hijack the legislative process. Well, that's what we're trying to restore to Missouri, this idea that an interested group of people can't go to the legislature and persuade them to take away someone else's freedom. So I want to introduce somebody tonight, and I really hope you'll have a chance to meet and speak with her. Her name's Brooke Gray. Brooke, if you would, stand up and give them a wave. Brooke Gray is on the front lines of our battle for economic liberty. Her profession is floating horses' teeth. And I don't imagine that a lot of people know what floating horses' teeth is all about, but horses' teeth grow throughout their lifetime, and they get these sharp points. And those points can cut the insides of their mouth. It can affect the way that they chew. It can really be damaging to the horse's health. And so for centuries, literally centuries, there have been people who specialized in going in and filing down the horse's teeth, making them flat or floating them is how they described it. And this was just something that was part of agricultural life for people who owned horses. About 20 years ago, the veterinarians in this state got a law passed that says to alter an animal's physical or mental state and accept compensation for it, you have to be a licensed veterinarian. And it's actually that broad. I actually am going to be violating the law tomorrow because I'm going to be taking my dogs to a pet groomer who doesn't hold a veterinary license. She's going to be altering their physical state by cutting their fur. She's going to be trimming their nails. She's going to be doing a couple of other just animal maintenance stuff on these animals. And technically, under the Missouri law, she would be committing a crime. She could be fined $1,000 per animal and up to a year in jail for each animal. And those are the penalties that Brooke is facing because she's developed a skill in working with animals. Now, Brooke's never had a complaint from anyone who has enjoyed her services. She's never had to advertise because, remember we talked about the power of word-of-mouth advertising? The people who have used her services have been thrilled, and they've told their friends. And so Brooke now has a clientele that stretches over a 5-state area. But according to the state of Missouri, she's a criminal if she accepts compensation for the work that she's doing. We think that when the Missouri Constitution says that you can't deprive someone of the enjoyment of the gains of their own industry, it means you can't give someone the right to do a certain activity, such as float horses' teeth, and then deny them the opportunity to accept compensation for the services that they've rendered. And keep in mind, the state is not saying that there's anything inherently dangerous about what she does. They're just saying, we think only vets should get to accept compensation for this. One other thing to keep in mind with Brooke's case, and I hope all the legislators in here in particular will take the opportunity to speak with Brooke, because we're hoping that the legislature will address this issue in the spring. As much as I am thrilled to take on this legal battle and to try and get it up to the Missouri Supreme Court, the fact of the matter is we've got at least 80 years of negative precedent against us. And so I could probably make the best argument you've ever heard about this, and we could still easily lose at the Missouri Supreme Court. And so we're hopeful that, particularly with some of the leadership that we've got now, and I think I see Senator-elect Brian Nieves at the back of the room. Glad to have you here tonight. Especially with some of the principled leadership that we've got now in Jefferson City, we hope that we can start to reverse this tide, to bring some common sense back to the way that we do occupational licensing in this state. I'll just hit on a couple of the other points that I had to make. I know I'm running out of time here. One of our other cases, the Freedom Center currently has two cases. One is Brooke's horse teeth case, and the other one is an apartment hunting case where a couple of folks, just ordinary people in Kansas City, came up with a great idea to help people find apartments. I don't know if anyone's ever tried apartment hunting, but it can be pretty difficult, especially if you don't know the area. They made a website where people could go and say what they were looking for, and it would pop up a list of potential properties that they could go and check out. Great little service. Again, they never had a complaint from anyone until a licensed realtor said, "We think that you're practicing real estate without a license." The state admitted that all the information they were providing was completely truthful. They admitted that it was completely harmless. The judge actually asked the Assistant Attorney General 3 times. He said, "Who's being hurt by this?" And the Assistant Attorney General couldn't give an answer other than when the law is violated, everyone is hurt. That was his answer. Okay? And their own expert witness said, the kind of information they're providing doesn't require any special training. This is just a simple service that they're providing. We lost at the trial level. We lost. And so now we're going to be in front of the Missouri Supreme Court in the spring, arguing that both the United States Constitution and particularly the Missouri Constitution say people have to be allowed to provide truthful information, to provide harmless services without the government interfering and getting in the way. That's the kind of work that we're going to do. So real quick, to sum up, what can we do in Missouri to try and start to push back this tide of regulation that prevents the economic liberty that we've been talking about? Well, the first thing is decriminalize these professions. Like I said, these are not simple slaps on the wrist that we're talking about. People are actually facing criminal prosecution as a result of these things. And so I think the first order of business is decriminalize these professions. The second thing, and I think that this is particularly important when we're talking about ways to cut back the state budget, as has been all in the news lately. In the last several years, the Division of Professional Licensing in Jeff City has spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars sending out private investigators to investigate people like Brooke. And in a great number of these cases, there was no complaint ever made by the customers, the clients of these people. It was all from the interested opposition. It was all from the realtors or veterinarians who wanted to get the business that these people had. That's where the complaints were coming from. And so a real simple fix to this would be to say, we can leave the laws as they are, but the Division of Professional Licensing is not allowed to pursue charges against people until you've got a customer or client who has complained about the service being provided. I don't think that's ideal, but it's a step in the right direction. And it would save the state a lot of money. Another thing is to make sure that consumers like you and me have a clear right to make our own decisions about who we're going to hire. One of the things that I've been pointing out in relation to Brooke's case is, for centuries, people who live on farms and ranches have been able to make their own decisions. If they needed some work done on their farm, they could go and get a hired hand to come and help them castrate their animals or dock the tails of their animals or brand their animals. They didn't have to go and get a veterinarian to do it. They were trusted to make their own decisions about who they were going to hire. I think this is an important right. And so I think that that's something that we could establish as well, potentially. And then another thing that I think we might be able to do is, instead of having these licensing programs where it erects walls that punish any unlicensed person who tries to earn a living in these different professions, we could impose a certification regime instead. Certification means that the state can kind of put its stamp of approval on somebody, say, we've checked out this person's credentials, we know that they have the training that they claim to have. And then beyond that, it's up to the citizens to decide whether they want to pay a premium for someone who's got this certification from the state, or whether they're willing to go with someone that hasn't been certified. But it's up to the consumer to make that decision. I think that this is another